Hi, I'm Anita Walker, Executive Director of the Mass Cultural Council, and welcome to our culture chat today. I cannot tell you how happy I am to have a good friend and wonderful cultural leader, Carole Charnow, with us today, who runs the Boston Children's Museum. And welcome to our chat.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here with you and with whomever else has joined the call.
Well, Carole, uh, tough times, and really kind of the reason we're doing the chats is sort of break out of the very, very heavy lift that so many of our organizations are undertaking at the moment. Our new survey just this week is showing something like more than $250 million in revenue losses, and more than 15,000 jobs affected. And it's hard work for you, for your colleagues, for all of our organizations. But we also know we want to just take a little bit of a slice of time out every day to really think about where the arts and culture is having a really, really positive impact in our environment and in our communities. And I couldn't help but think of you first when we were even thinking about doing the culture chats, because the Children's Museum is a special place. It's a fun place. It's a place we go for the birthday parties or for a reward or a treat or a field trip. And now with so many moms and dads and others at home with their kids all day long, every day, you are being almost a more potent resource than ever. Do you feel that?
Yes, I do. And it's really been quite remarkable. I mean, in the lead up to this crisis, we had already had a number of online resources that we over the years have had obtained grants for or done on our own. We have an after school curriculum that's used across the world. We have many different learning resources for parents and teachers. And as soon as we closed, Anita, which was March 13th, we immediately kind of jumped into this online museum mode, which, 5 weeks on has just developed a lot. And, I give my staff a lot of credit because here they are working in their homes, on this little camera. And, they've really risen to the occasion. Their creativity and agency has really come out. And now we are doing really a daily post. We are putting into it YouTube videos we're doing ourselves, activities. We have a make-a-thon challenge for kids to make something that helps their community. We're also showcasing really great ideas that are coming from other museums and cultural institutions. A couple weeks ago, we showcased the Boston Symphony. So we are looking at ideas really from across the social media spectrum to really curate, if you will, into one daily post for parents and then and caregivers and kids. And then we have a landing page where we're archiving them all. So if people need resources, they can go back anytime. And we're finding a tremendous uptake. Interestingly, a lot of our corporate sponsors are sending this to their employees, many of whom are furloughed or just at home. We've been told by TJX and Citizens Bank, they're using it, the Department of Children and Families, Early Education and Care, Strategies for Children. So we are just so relieved that we have a portal for continuing our mission during this really, really difficult time.
Could you say a little bit more about, say I'm at home, and believe me, I have been on these Zoom meetings where there are these little footsteps that are coming and going and tugging on a sleeve and mom. And I remember we were having a senior staff meeting and one of my staff members had to pause and say, no, your brother is not going to take your Lego. These are the kinds of bits of conversations that sort of interject in between our serious business work that we're doing. So what are some examples of some of the kinds of fun things that you're providing kids and parents to do in these situations?
So one of the things that was really fun, so we have to remember that a lot of the families don't have a lot of resources in their homes, across the economic spectrum. So we don't want to ask them to use all these sort of sophisticated, art supplies and so on. So for example, our head of our art studio, Faith, she did this wonderful program where she did a color parade, she called it, It was called Rainbow Colors. And what she did was she showed how every child could collect little items from the house that were of a certain color of the rainbow, and they could put them all together and make a little video of them. And she did a lovely voiceover with her hands, you know, bringing all of these little pieces together. Another one of our staff, I never knew this, she'd written a children's book that never was published. So she actually did a video program where she videoed each of the pages, and she published it online during this YouTube section, this YouTube project we have. And another staff member did something with food coloring and milk. And, the sky's the limit. We had one person do a whole program on pickling vegetables with just simple, a jar and vinegar. So, I mean, it runs the gamut. And I think what characterizes the stuff we're doing and the resources, it just really feels like us. And I mean, this is where the issue of culture comes in. It's not highly polished. It's very folksy. Everybody's in their house with their whatever clothes they're wearing. In fact, I've dressed up more today than I've dressed up in about a month, Anita.
Great, Carol, really good. Only at least from the waist up. I don't know what else.
My son, who's working from home, just said to me, "Mom, did you put on earrings today?" So so it's been a wonderful outlet for our staff, and so gratifying that they have a way of reaching out to people, and we are getting really great feedback that people are enjoying what we're doing, and we're trying to stay in touch with them, because how close we are to them during this time will actually have an impact on how we return from this crisis.
One of the sort of almost counterintuitive aspects of this whole environment in which we're all living is we talk about isolation, social isolation, sequestering ourselves at home. But so often as I have these conversations, I'm feeling like organizations like yours, arts and cultural artists, teaching artists, are actually creating better connections in the home that we would have ordinarily. If we were going to work on a typical day and then we come home, and then typically everybody goes into their own laptop or into their own room or into their own technology zone. And the activities that you're describing, it's one thing for a family to come together to the Children's Museum where they'll interact together with all of the great exhibits and so forth that you have there. But maybe they don't do that so much in their own home because they didn't even know they had the fun things to play with there.
It's funny you mentioned that. One of the things we did just recently, we just opened a new exhibit called Play Space, which is for children 3 and under. And we've been having to do a report for one of the grants we had. And we did a little survey to just find out how visitors like the exhibit. And one thing we found was that they were setting up the exhibit at their house. One of the little modules in there is an air table where the kids can put a little a scarf under a blast of air, and it flies up. And it really delights the little ones. And they're doing that at home. And they're setting up little obstacle courses at home. And, this idea that you can take what you do at the museum home is something we always talk about when we're open. But as you said, it's something we've never had people really practice in this way. So we hope that those that are able, I don't know the numbers that are able to do this at home with their children and they're working and all the other pressures they have. But, it is fun to think that they are replicating some of our exhibits and programs at home.
We were talking earlier before we went live on our program here about getting through this and all the different ways arts and culture organizations are staying connected, sort of through technology. But you're also looking ahead, because we don't know how long this will last, but we know that we will be coming out of it at some point in time, whether, incrementally or slowly or one step at a time or over weeks or months. And that's a strategy in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because, we're all winging it here. We've never ever been here, and you can see I'm not the youngest of leaders, and I've been leading nonprofits for many, many years, and nothing has ever happened to me like this. Just as an example of what you're saying, we've had from day one this emergency preparative task force that meets 3 mornings a week by phone. Well, just last Wednesday, I changed the name to the Recovery Task Force. So I think what's been happening, as we watch the evolution of this crisis, we're looking for cues from our governor, from our mayor, from our other colleagues at other institutions, from the press, as to what is recovery going to look like here. And so I'm very proud that the Boston cultural institutions and museums, the aquarium, the zoo, all of us are kind of exploring together what a recovery would look like. And of course, none of us knows the month. None of us knows what measures are going to be put in place. When this comes back, we can kind of imagine that there'll be social distancing to some extent, that audiences and visitors will want to be sure that we are really, really paying attention to their needs in terms of keeping safe, keeping distant, making sure everything is sanitized to the maximum, maybe having more sanitizer. I mean, all of these things that we are now trying to anticipate go into this sort of notion of recovery. And of course, there's, Anita, no one knows better than you, there's the whole financial aspect of this. I mean, how long before we get back to anything like the attendance or visitation that we had in the past? And so that's anyone's guess, but we all have to start figuring it out for FY21 and the rest of FY20. So we're turning our minds, and it is, I have to say, it feels a little bit better to be talking about recovery than emergency preparedness. Even though we're in the surge, I think we're beginning to see that we are going to emerge from this.
When you think about recovery, Carole, is it sort of Humpty Dumpty putting the pieces back together? Or are you thinking about opportunities that maybe as we rebuild, we actually build in better than we had before? Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And, gosh, Anita, your words, I hope they go right to our governance, whether it's state or city. I mean, what we're seeing here is a mammoth crisis in terms of equity for our community. I mean, you just have to look at the numbers that came out of Mary Lou Sutter's the other day of COVID cases by town, and you can really see who is being impacted, and many of them are communities that are already marginalized to some extent. So you ask yourself, when we do come back, what can we put in place that will really try to address some of these issues? How can we be more relevant to the communities that need us the most? And, really across the spectrum, everyone needs us now. I mean, what we're learning is that there are increasing issues of mental health, with kids and families cooped up at home. And I talked about the inequities. And then, I'll be honest, some of the issues we had before the crisis about the business model of the Children's Museum, we had really felt we'd come to a point where we couldn't really grow anymore. We can't keep raising prices. Of course, costs were just spiraling out of control. All kinds of costs, just the economy was just racing ahead. And I think it was getting harder for nonprofits to some extent to keep up with growth. So this will give us a chance to kind of relook even at our business model. And of course, this online activity, this idea of continuing that and finding a way to integrate it into our programmatic work is kind of an interesting idea. Of course, now we're giving away everything free.
this is one of my observations that I am kind of concerned about. I mean, I think this is one of these, again, this whole notion of wrestling technology and having it work for us instead of vice versa. It has been an amazing access portal. I mean, when I see local musicians who can't perform locally anymore, so they put their music online and now they can reach the universe.
Right.
They're not getting paid. And we haven't seen somebody successfully figure out how to monetize this incredible product, these awesome services that we're now giving away for free online. So I think that's going to be one of the big challenges of our field.
Yeah.
But coming back to you, Carole, because you run a children's museum, and so you have the incredible delight and privilege of actually working with this amazing clay that is the next generation that is going to teach all of us what the new world is going to be like.
Right.
And at first I was thinking about when you were talking about, well, in the recovery, we're going to have more, hand sanitizers. And all I can think of is toddlers and sanitizing. I mean, how do you think of that?
I was just talking about this morning. So already, prior to this, we already clean the Children's Museum to hospital standards every night. I mean, so the biggest bill of our annual budget is cleaning. We have a professional cleaning force that cleans hospitals. So, our CFO was saying, how much cleaner can we get than clean? But, a lot of this is what people see you doing. I mean, you've all been to grocery stores where you can see they're sanitizing the carts and things. It gives you sort of an extra layer of safety and security. But you make a really good point, Anita. The hands-on institutions like the Science Center, the aquarium, the Children's Museum, we do have a special challenge.
Yes, you do.
We do. And and the other thing about our institutions is that we pride ourselves in being urban meeting places, in gathering places where the community comes together and they share ideas and they interact with one another. And, this is really challenging. You can imagine you could probably start a theater or a concert with people sitting several seats apart, but how do you get people in a hands-on museum to not have hands-on?
Well, and the whole
it's sort of an oxymoron, right?
Well, and then the little ones, they're tactile learners. I mean, this is
right.
Before they have vocabulary. This is even before, they can articulate ideas and thoughts. So they do it with their hands and they do it with touching and that sort of human connection. And I'm just imagining a bunch of 2 and 3-year-olds with their little masks and latex gloves in the Children's Museum.
That's not going to happen. I mean, I think this is, Anita, you just nailed what we're contemplating, is that if everyone has to wear masks and gloves and go into a museum, it's probably not time to open. This is the scary part about it, is that, when you look at the phases that people are describing, I mean, we may be later. So, I mean, one of the things we're thinking about, we're very fortunate to have the outdoor space in front of the museum that's open to the water. So we're thinking maybe, what I'm seeing in some of the really good data, like that's coming from Colleen, how do you say her name? It's called Know Your Own Bone. Mm-hmm. If you don't have access to that yet, you should really try and follow her. She's doing weekly audience surveys on intent to return. And really, really great information. And one of the things we're seeing is that people are more likely to return if they have space around them and they can kind of keep their distance. So it makes one think that maybe the zoos, might have a little bit of an easier time, parks, outdoor attractions. So we're starting to think a little bit about maybe doing more outdoors in front of the museum to start with. And then, of course, the issue is if it's free, then, that's wonderful, but that's not going to help with the fact that we have virtually no income. So, all of these, I'll tell you, strategic thinking is on the up.
And we're tapping into something that is a superpower of our field, and that's creativity and innovation.
And flexibility, yep.
I don't want to let this pass, since you've given me the opportunity to say it once again. And that is, none of this happens without resources. And when I look at the value, I mean, the crucial, incredible value that you and our organizations are providing at a time when people need it most. I mean, kids are not in school. I mean, that stimulation, that creative mind exercise that is part and parcel of continuing to grow the brain during these critical times of life, especially with young children. You're making that possible, even with the harried parent at home who's on the Zoom meeting with their boss saying, no, your brother won't take your Lego. Now, back to the issue at hand. You're providing, I mean, you are basically being part and parcel of the school system. You are ordinarily anyway, we know that in Boston, but I mean, you're doing it now. You're doing home visits. You are, I mean, you are right there in the houses. And you know, that does not happen with no cost. And I think we can value it intellectually, we can value it emotionally, but we've got to value it financially, or you can't continue to do it.
Yeah.
I'm lecturing you, Carole.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, you know, we talk about our different audiences. So we have a membership audience, we have a casual visitor audience, and we, of course, have our philanthropy supported audience, which comes from the EBT, the Card to Culture, et cetera. And so we're really trying to kind of think about the return in all these different dimensions, and figure out how we can maximize the experience for everyone. But yeah, finding ways to get sponsorship or advertising associated with these various resources we're providing it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think, to be honest, like while we're in this surge, you know, for the next couple weeks, we're really laying low in terms of figuring a lot of, well, talking with corporations and donors that much. I think people are just kind of frightened at the moment, but I do think by the onset of May, I don't think this will be at all past us, but I do think people more and more will be thinking about recovery, and that might be a moment to start talking with some potential sponsors of this kind of thing, and hopefully we can find some way to monetize it.
So Carole, I didn't want to tell you this at first because I didn't want to make you nervous, but for the very first time, we are also doing this live on Facebook. And I don't know if you notice Carmen is behind the scenes, but she put that in a little chat. And so we also have an audience on Facebook as well as our participants here on Zoom. But one of the things that I think we're all collectively we're actually writing best practices about the use of technology and delivering the arts and culture and so forth. And to me, the interactivity, if we're going to be getting out there and reaching people all over the Commonwealth and who knows else, I want to hear back from them. So I know we've got some Zoomers out there with us, and I know we have some Facebookers out there with us, and I would really love for you to hit that. Now, if you're a Zoom person, hit that QA button. Send us a comment, send us a question, and Carmen, I don't know how you do it from Facebook Live. There's probably a way, but you know, and Facebookers, you just send Carmen something and she'll make sure that we get a chance to see it and have a chance to incorporate it into our conversation. So just put some kind of comment, some kind of question, and there Carmen is flashing the chat box, so she'll add any Facebook comments there so you can be part of the conversation with us. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go back to Carole, and I'm going to say, because you are one of the most brilliant visionary dreamers that there is, and I know right now that there's so many weeds that you're having to navigate in this time, and you've even talked about this word recovery, which is a sort of a coming back out of it kind of a world. But if you were going to look, 2 or 3 years down the road and look in your rear view mirror and say, what did we really learn from this experience? It was not a good one. It was a painful one. We didn't like it, but actually there's some things that we learned that we can actually incorporate into whether it's our business models, our activities, our exhibits, or the way we relate with our audiences and with our kids. Are there anything that come immediately to mind?
Just making a few notes here. I think I love that you said that, Anita, and I've said that to my staff, my colleagues as well, is that what will we look back on during this time and say that we did well, or that, really helped us going forward? And one of the things I would say is I keep our institutional culture and values very close to me every day. I actually review our values, our articulated values. I keep the mission of the institution close to my mind, because I think to myself, there are many crises that occur during the lifetime of an institution. And really the measure of how we get out of that is the measure of how true we stayed to our mission. So I think that would be the first thing I would look back on and say, did we stay true to our mission? I think that the thinking about, as hard as it is to be have a silver lining from all this, one has to recognize that there are new muscles that we are flexing that we have never done before. I mean, just on the very basic thing of more people working from home. I mean, saving the pollution and the gas that we're taking to get to our workplaces, recognizing how we can still build culture and have collaboration and teamwork while some of us are working at home. So what's the problem if we spared people some of that horrible commute? And of course, having time to really think about our audience. A couple of my staff members have said to me that it's been a real blessing to have time to step back and actually evaluate their work, document their work, and think more deeply about how we can serve our visitors and our constituency and our community. And lastly, I would just say connection. The fact that we have many different means available to us to connect to our community, to be helpful, to participate in their lives. And, indeed, we're going to need to participate in the healing of our communities, just as we did after the marathon bombing, Anita. Cultural institutions were so pivotal, so important in the coming out of that. And so all of these things, I think, are takeaways that we will hopefully be able to look back on and say, we did that. We stayed true. We stuck to our mission. We stayed connected. We invested in our community. So that's what I'm trying to do.
And you absolutely are. And by the way, continuing to pave new way, because not only is this our first cultural chat on Facebook Live, but we've already gotten our first comments from the Facebook. I don't know how that happened. But we heard from Susan Loring Wells, who says yes to online being an amazing portal for artists, museums, and performers. And Debbie Bentley, and I think this will take you back, Carole, because you've been around a long time, and me too. She suggests, Debbie says, make all museums free by using lottery funding like they do in the UK. Now, Debbie, there is this thing called the Arts Lottery. Carole, do you remember that?
I certainly do. That goes back to the 70s. When I first started doing arts in Boston, yep, I remember the Arts Lottery.
Yeah, and what was the money supposed to go to?
The arts. What happened there, Anita? I don't know.
Yeah, Debbie, great idea, and actually everything old is new again. I'm all for it. Let's devote that lottery funding to support our organizations. And then here we have a question or a comment that's come in on our Zoom. How do you keep morale up among your employees and volunteers at this time of crisis?
Oh my God, that is such a good question. So leadership is really important during this time, and I've adapted this thing that I suppose because I'm from the theater world comes a little bit easier to me than many. I'm over communicating, and boy, it is absolutely exhausting. This takes the form of many more phone calls and Zoom calls than I'm used to. I mean, this is really round the clock. You guys are working really hard. I know we're doing so much more communicating than we ever do. I would say over communicating. I would say authentic connection to your staff. If you feel awful, just have a laugh about it. I mean, we're all in each other's houses. I mean, here you guys, everyone knows this is my top floor of my house. There's something about the authenticity of just being real, letting people see who you really are, sharing with them the things that make you laugh. I will say every Friday I do send out a kind of a message to my staff. Sometimes I add a little quote or a little picture or an anecdote. I just try to make myself very present, very visible, very here for them. And, you know, I think that this online activity is really helping too, because we are, you know, people are have something to do that's meaningful. So those are little tips that I would suggest to keep morale on the up and up.
And one other tip, join us for our culture chats with
Yes.
upbeat, positive, and optimistic people like Carole. We try to do these 2 or 3 times a week, and we have a nice lineup coming up the next week. So please join us. Come back again early and often to the culture chat. And Carole, thank you so much for all you're doing for children and families. Anybody who can connect with you online, and we have put all of your links to your resources on the chat, so you can check it out there or just go to the Boston Children's Museum's website. With Carole, thank you so much for being part of our program today.
And thank you, Anita, for everything you are doing for us. All the best to all of you. Stay healthy, stay strong.
Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.